What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Beyond Ordinary podcast. I have my man Jeff Revilla on the show. We're gonna talk everything live, podcast studio, podcasting in general, the whole nine yard. How you doing today, Jeff?
Oh, I'm doing great. So excited to be here. I can't wait to talk over these next 30, 40 minutes. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. So, what made you want to own your own live podcast studio as opposed to just a traditional studio?
It really was because of a platform in 2015 called Blab. And the internet's kind of divided by the people who were there for Blab and who
Hmm.
weren't. And if you were there and you talked to somebody who else was there, like this website holds a place in your heart because you would go live. And in 2015, it was one of these first four in the box live stream services. And it had this social element where it would just drop 30 to 40 people on your live stream in the first 3 minutes. It was incredible. It would notify everybody and people would just pop in. It was like this giant party, and I started recording a trivia show,
Uh-huh.
for my first trivia podcast called Stuff I Never Knew, and I started to realize that podcasting is so much more than just recording in my home studio, creating an MP3 file, and then distributing it through an RSS feed to all these apps. This podcast could be more. It could be a social event. It could be a community gathering.
Hmm.
It could be all these people coming together for a single purpose to have fun. And that whole concept stayed with me well after the time when Blab folded. It just like it had no business model and it just kind of collapsed on itself because it got so
Yeah.
big it couldn't handle it.
Hmm.
But that stayed with me, and I thought like, "Man, if I could do that again or have that feeling again of being in front of an audience and performing this podcast, and maybe I could take it on the road, or I wanted to start doing this in people's basements, like house parties, go to a house party, set up a game show in their basement, and record the audio for my podcast." And I wanted to just keep connecting with people over and over and bringing people together in a central environment, and just it was so much fun.
Hmm.
And that's kinda how I got to the theater idea, a couple different iterations, uh, but this was, like, the final concept of thinking about this for about 7 years.
Hmm. Cool. I'm actually glad that you brought that up in terms of connecting with people and things like that. Making connections is very key. So actually, this past weekend, I actually went to an event. It was for creatives, and it was cool. And I went to the event because I wanted to. I was mainly there to obviously have fun, but I was there also critiquing because I had just went to podcast evolutions, and it kind of inspired me to to start doing events revolved around my podcast or just an event in general. So my question to you is the different events that have happened in your space. Can you tell me what makes a good event or what has been a good example? Like what can make or break an event? Let's start there.
Yeah, making or breaking it is the host, 100%.
Mm,
When we go into this and some people maybe don't have the experience of being on stage, I kinda get them to outline the show, get some sort of structure, because not only am I producing it and I've never seen the show, but, I need a little bit of an idea how to get through from segment to segment. But for them, it gives them a roadmap to get from point A to point B, the start and the finish of the show, and we'll go through that routine, we'll go through that outline, and the big thing that I really stress on is if you make a mistake, nobody knows but you. It's like your own little secret. When you're on
absolutely.
stage and you mess up or you miss a line or you don't say the right thing in the right order, the audience only thinks that that's just part of the show. Like everything you do is planned and intentional to the audience because they don't know your order. They don't know your structure or what you're going to say. If you harp on it and you're like, "Oh man, I messed up. I said that line out of order. I screwed up and I ruined the whole show." Then your mentality in that moment is going to ruin the whole show. So when
Mm,
you make mistakes, I train and I harp on just keep the show moving. The one thing that you can do to make a great show and a great experience is just keep going. Don't slow down. Don't worry that you made a mistake. Don't trip over your words. Keep the show moving and the audience will love it. They're there to see you. They're already there to support you.
yeah.
They know who you are. They like who you are. They trust who you are because they've been listening to you for however many episodes you've been doing, or a lot of times it's friends and family and and close fans that they know maybe through work or other associations. they're all there to support you anyway. So keep that positive mental attitude, get through the show, keep to your script and just keep the show moving because you can single-handedly tank a show with your attitude.
Absolutely. That's one thing I always try to do whenever I have a interview. I really try to make sure I'm mentally prepared and just give it my all. You know what I mean? Because the last thing I want to do is for somebody to watch one of my episodes and be like, "Damn, like Miles in like he seems off today." You know what I mean? Like, nah, like you gotta show up for your audience. You got to show up for the people that are listening to your show. So that's some great advice. So I want to also ask you, what are some of the benefits of having a live podcast studio as opposed to a traditional one?
Yeah, I mean, there are things that happen in a live environment that you don't get when you just release an MP3 file on Monday. You come back 7 days later and look at your download numbers. You don't get any feedback in that situation. All you know is, last week X number of people downloaded my show, and this week X number plus a few more downloaded my show. There's no reason or there's no rhyme. You don't understand what's happening. But a couple things happen in a live environment. One, when you say, "Hey, we've been doing this podcast for a year now. Next Saturday night, we're going to be live on the main stage at the Poduty Podcast Theater doing a live version of this show." Instantly, when you say live on the main stage, the credibility of your show goes through the roof. Even though people know that you've had a podcast, you've probably have talked to everybody like, "I got a podcast. Mom and dad know I got a podcast." And whether or not they've ever listened to you, whenever you take this into the real world, it becomes tangible to everybody around you, and the value that people perceive your show as goes way up.
Hmm.
And then when you're performing the show, you're looking at the audience, you're seeing how they're reacting, you're watching them laugh. You're getting real-time feedback of how the show is actually perceived, by your audience. And
Yep.
and for the audience, they get to see you. Like, they've only been listening to you on their workout or their morning commute. Now they get to see how you form thoughts, how you react to maybe your host and or your co-host or the person you're interviewing. They get to see the way your brain works and thinks in real time. And it's this great exchange between the audience and the host where you never get that when you're just downloading the MP3 file. And then afterwards, the audience, they get to meet you, right? They shake your hand. They thank you for the episode you created. They say, "Man, that one you did a few weeks ago, I was in this crazy place, but you made me laugh and you gave me some good tips on how to run my business and I implemented them. And I just want to come out tonight and thank you for that." You get this exchange that you don't get when you just release a file and hope somebody comments on your Facebook page. It's such a much more valuable interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I can't wait to host my first event. I don't know what it's gonna be about. I don't know how it's gonna be. At least for me, it's like I just want to make sure that it's really good and like really fleshed out. Like, especially because it's gonna be live. Like, I wouldn't consider myself like a quote unquote perfectionist, especially like not with my edited content. I'll put out something. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But if I have an event and I have people actually pay money to like come see me and support me at an event, oh yeah, I'm gonna make sure that it's top notch. So one of these days, I'm gonna do something, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna
Well,
be
you're
good.
probably ready now. Like, we tell people you're mostly going to record in your home studio, your home office.
Mhm.
That's where 90% of your recording happens. But that 10% should be a special occasion, should be a reward for your fans. It should be a little bit looser of a structure, and it should be this night out, this little like party, a little festive environment where we're going to do this live in front of our fans, and it's going to be not incredible, but anything could happen, right? It's not as structured as the normal show, but it's a fan appreciation. It's for you guys, to come out, hang out with us while we make a show. And people are very forgiving. People understand
Mhm.
that you're doing this for them. They appreciate you just coming out, giving them something to do on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. You know, that's part of all this exchange between the fan and the podcast host is you're really getting into a new area that like most creators don't get into on a regular basis. So, even if you like to have a very structured edited show, these are special events. These are special occasions to come out and do a live show in front of an audience. People are much more forgiving when they're having a good time. There's a bar next door. They can go over, get a couple drinks, come back with some food. That's great, and that's all part of this environment that we're trying to foster here. It should be a night out of fun and just relaxing and having a good time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna do it sometime this year. I'm gonna challenge myself to try and get at least one in this year.
Well, hey, you're only 4 or 5 hours away, so you drive up here anytime.
Hey, I appreciate it. I'll keep that in mind. Followed the page and everything, so got a venue already locked in.
All right.
So, tell me about one of the most challenging parts about running your live studio.
Yeah, well, one thing I realized when I opened the doors last June was while I've been thinking about this for about 7 years to get to this point,
Mm,
I realized nobody else was. So for me, I kind of opened the doors without really planning and doing that networking in the podcasting community locally.
right.
Virtually not a problem. I can say I'm going to do a virtual event, and by Saturday, I'll have all 30 spots filled with different podcasters. That's easy. But locally, I thought I'd open the doors. Podcasters would just come marching in, like, we're going to do a live podcast. And it wasn't like that at all. It was, we had our opening day that was kind of nice, but then it was crickets through the summertime. And it
Damn.
was, people were on vacation. They weren't thinking about podcast theaters. They were getting ready to go back to school. And I'm emailing people. I'm panicking. I'm sweating, like trying to call people.
Yeah.
And it just took until about like October, November, we started doing these meetups locally. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do to get more people in here, but we started doing these meetups. I started buying pizza and drinks for podcasters. I said, come on out. You'll meet other podcasters. We'll tackle some of your toughest questions. We'll all brainstorm together. It'll be 20,
Mhm.
30 people in this room, and we'll take your hardest questions and we'll solve them that night. And ever since then, that's been kind of like this catalyst that has really unlocked the local community and gotten the attention on the because this is a new form of entertainment. People don't think of podcast theaters as a form of entertainment. They
Right.
think when they think comedy, they think comedy clubs to go see a comedian, or they think music, they think a bar or a venue to go see live music. But when they think podcasting, like I said earlier, it's something they do on their morning commute or while they're working out. They
Exactly.
don't think of it as a form of entertainment. So, I'm trying to convince these podcasters this is something new you can do, maybe as a revenue stream as well. And then I'm also teaching the public this is a new form of entertainment. You want to come out on a Friday night? It's $5, $10 for a night of laughter and fun and maybe inspiration and education, depending on what the podcast is about. That's all things that can happen now, and they didn't exist a year ago in a form like this in a live event space with a theater where you could perform a live show in front of a new audience. So for me, the biggest challenge was tackling this on two sides, from the creators to the audience, and really getting that first bit of momentum was took 6 to 8 months to really get things going. A lot of scary nights.
No, I bet. I bet. So it sounds like you pretty much got your community of podcasters together, did like some sort of event, just like Q&A event, and then from there, once they were more familiar about you and what you had to offer, like more people started coming.
Yeah, I had the groundwork. So I know
Hmm.
a lot of people have reached out to me. How did you do this? How do you do it? And the thing I'd say, if you're thinking about this like I did, I pieced a lot of the pieces together over a couple years. So you have some time to go from idea to launching your own theater. But in that time, I would 1000% recommend starting to find those people now who are interested in doing live shows, starting to network with the podcast community locally and just get in front of them. Even try maybe some live pop-up shows at a lot of libraries have media centers,
Hmm.
bars or coffee shops will let you do podcasts. Start playing around with this idea in your community to see what kind of traction you have existing already. Because don't do what I did and just open the door and think it's going to be, you're just going to be printing money and taking it to the bank every night.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's kind of crazy. You said that you started, you had no plan, just opened the door and just winged it. But I mean, sometimes like that's the best way to go about things. Like you instead of thinking about it for years on end and, having something until you get that cookie cutter plan to just, jump in and do it. And obviously it worked out for you. So,
What
big
I
congrats to that.
thank you, but I thought that the virtual connections that I had would translate to in-person connections, and that was a complete mistake. So, make
Mm,
sure locally you've got your bases covered too, because it's easy. Like, we connected through Podmatch or Matchmaker or Facebook groups. You can find virtual guests for your podcast very easily. The friction has been removed. But if you go out into your local town and try to find just go ahead, just try to find a podcaster in your city, not using the internet, it's very, very difficult to like, who do I talk to? Who do I even know?
mhm.
So you really have to, work this from two different angles.
For sure, yeah, it's definitely that's pretty much why my interviews are pretty much like it's probably like 50-50 in person versus virtual. It's a little significantly easier for me to find somebody virtually that I'm interested in talking to and reaching out to them compared to, me thinking about who I want to talk to and getting them in person and stuff like that. It's a little bit of a challenge, but it's been rewarding. So I want to ask you, what changes do you see in the future for podcasting?
Yeah, when you look at what's happened between 2017 and 2025, between podcast consumption being a very heavy audio medium to now the definition of what is a podcast has kind of eroded away. A podcast really now is kind of any independent media. I still think, you need to have that MP3 file distributed by an RSS feed to podcast apps. That's still the essence of a podcast, but we're doing video right now. That can go to YouTube and social media. And I'm taking that a step further, this next evolution where looking, and I can get into some numbers about why I believe this, but the next evolution is in-person live events, and I really believe that that's where we're going. We already see this happening with celebrities and comedians. They're filling up Madison Square Garden. They're
Hmm.
filling up theaters and towns all over the country because they already have built up that audience and that draw. They can do that. And you and I right now we're in home studios, but what happened? How do we go from a home studio to Madison Square Garden? How do you and I play Madison Square Garden when there's nothing in between, right? It's
Hmm.
home studio or theater, right? What I'm doing is the small little micro theater with a 40 seat with the capability to live stream to thousands. That's this middle ground between bridging that gap between going from your home studio to a large theater arena. You're going to have to practice being in front of people. And those larger acts are going to start to need opening acts, just like you saw in the 80s with like heavy metal tours would and rock bands would come through town. You don't just go see the main band, you see two or three opening acts with them. And
Hmm.
if we look at what has happened to music, music brings opening acts. When podcasts go live to your theaters and arenas, they're not gonna be able to just do one podcast for $100 ticket. That model won't last forever. They're gonna need to be more competitive and to give the audience more content. They'll have to do opening acts. So my goal with this is kind of being that middle position between transitioning from your home studio, your home office to those theaters and arenas by giving people practice in front of smaller stages, smaller audiences to build up that hosting muscle, build up that public performance muscle, so that they can get on stage and open for Whitney Cummings or Burt Kreischer or somebody whose podcast is coming through town. They can be an opening act for those types of shows.
Hmm. So would you say that it's imperative for if someone has a podcast to get used to doing live events as opposed to like what we're doing pre-recording? You think that
Yeah,
they need to branch out?
if you look at and this is in me, this is Libsyn, this is Buzzsprout. Their statistics tell you, their server logs will tell you that 95% of shows do not get more than 1,100 downloads on average per show. 95%. So the majority of people are, let's say, let's use 1,000 as an even number. The problem is when you look at ad rates and how they sell ads for podcasts, you're typically selling at a $20 to $25 CPM. So for every 1,000 downloads you get, you can do an ad for about $20.
Mhm.
So if most podcasters aren't getting 1,000 downloads, they aren't really at a point to get a $20 ad on their show. So you can have 1,000 downloads and make $20. Now, if I sold 1,000 tickets to a live show and my profit was $5 per ticket, now I'm making $5,000 per 1,000 people. So
Mhm.
the value of having people in front of you is 400 times greater than having 1,000 downloads on a podcast. So if we know that podcasters aren't getting a lot of downloads, 95% of you aren't getting a lot of downloads,
Mhm.
what other business model exists for you? Well, for that, 1,000 downloads to make $20 on your digital podcast, you could literally have 4 to 5 people show up to your live event, and you're gonna make as much money as you would getting 1,000 downloads on your podcast. So, when you start to see, like, okay, there's so much more value in somebody watching me live than some anonymous person downloading my episode, it starts to, like, change the way you think about live events and live and in-person events. If you get 20 people to show up, if you get 100 people to show up,
Mhm.
that's a tenth of who are downloading, but at 5 you're making $500 per 100 instead of $20 per 1,000. So, events start to get way more lucrative the more you grow. And what do we focus on? We focus on feeding these social networks. We talk about the algorithm. We have to give them this content and pray that the algorithm gods bless us with an audience. And if you do that, you get rewarded with $20. But if you took that same effort and energy and built your local community and got 20 people, got 30 people to show up,
Mhm.
30 people at $10 is $300. That's way more than you'd make in 2.5 months with 1,000 people downloading your show every episode. So,
For sure. So
the value is exponentially greater when you perform to people in front of you instead of these walled gardens of social media and digital downloads.
absolutely. And in that example that you gave, that makes sense. But as you were speaking, I was thinking of, even though there is, in that example, you could make, I think you said like 5,000 if it was, what, 1,000 tickets that you sold for $5 profit, which is significantly more. One thing, and this is probably the biggest thing that's probably stopping me from doing an event, is that, well, one, I actually already have experience doing events. I threw parties here in DC for like, how long has it been? Like 7, I think, going on 8 years. And I could tell you that it is a lot of work in terms of marketing and making sure that events are successful, making sure it's not a flop and all that good stuff, as well as the fact that when you do a podcast like this, where like I record and I post it one time, one, it's a lot less frictionless. I don't have
Mhm.
to like I can, obviously, like, I will and can promote the episode, but at the same time, it's also going to be on the internet forever. So I'll always be able to, profit and monetize off of it um, later, as opposed to a live event. It's like a one-time thing. You
Sure.
know what I mean? So I would say that those are. I mean, it's like it's a give and take in terms of live events compared to a pre-recorded podcast.
Let me how many parties do you think you've hosted in the last 7 or 8 years?
Um,
Just a
probably
ballpark
it's
them.
probably like 100.
At 100, was
Hmm.
your 100th party as hard to throw as your first?
No.
No, because over that time, right, you probably build up a mailing list. You probably have, a way to contact people. You probably have a way to get the message out that, hey, this is happening this Friday.
Hmm.
So that repetition of over and over again, you build up that audience, you build up that network so that now when you throw your 101st party,
Hmm.
you can notify that group, like, hey, we're ready to go this weekend, be there. And you already have a head start from where you were at episode one, or not episode party number one.
Hmm.
And same thing with podcasting and doing this live, the same way you're trying to build up your email list or build up the subscribers on iTunes or wherever. You're doing that in the real world where you're saying, we're doing a live show. Here's the first 10 people that came. Great. I'm going to email them for the episode number 2 that we do live. and I'm going to build on that through advertising. So maybe 20 people show up to the second one, and you keep just like you're doing when you're hosting these parties, you're building up that network over and over again.
Mhm.
And
It
when
compounds.
you
Mhm.
do the groundwork, the first 10 episodes that you do live, by year maybe you do one a month, for a year. By the second year on episode 13, things really start to change, right? You have this whole network. You have a regular event that you're hosting and drawing in an audience, and people are starting to come because they're familiar with it. And it gets so lucrative as this scales beyond, the 40 seats in my theater. When you start and you get to the 1,000 other people who are watching live at home or around the world or watching your show being performed live,
Mhm.
it just starts the whole dynamic of what is possible in a podcast business model opens up and changes dramatically.
Mm, okay. I mean, that makes sense. The more you do something, the better you're gonna get. Especially even just doing a podcast, what we're
Yeah.
doing now. Like I used to, my first episode that I filmed with my show was filmed it on Zoom, and I had this cheap like $10 microphone. I had no idea what I was doing. Obviously, I upgraded my equipment significantly since then. So yeah, there are some learning curves. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I want to ask you in terms of what are some common mistakes that podcasters make when trying to grow their audience.
Really rushing it and maybe rushing it for the wrong reasons. You know, unfortunately, as much as this is a hobby and it's fun to do and it's great to connect with people and meet new people, a lot of times the monetization of podcasts gets pushed on you, like how many downloads you get, how much money you making, are you
Yeah.
supporting yourself yet? And podcasters tend to chase that. And I said, instead of chasing that, refine your skill set, become better on the microphone, become a better host, become better at making a product that people fall in love with. Don't
Mhm.
chase the money. Don't you hear me talk about selling tickets and a different way to make money, but you still have to put on a good show. You still have to make a product that people want. That has to be your focus. You can do the other things. You can network with potential sponsors and advertisers and maybe side hustle on trying to do events or speaking on stages at other events, but your primary product is your podcast, and you have to make sure that thing is buttoned up. You have to make sure every time you do it a little bit better than the previous time and keep growing that skill set. Keep learning how to host and learn how to be a better, learn how to make your show better week after week after week. Chase those things, chase your own goals. Try to best yourself. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. A lot of people are like, oh, that show gets 5,000 downloads. I'm only getting 500. I'm not as good. No, no, you're a 500 download show right now. Your goal is to beat 500. Can you get to 550? That should be your next goal. I'm averaging 550 in 7 days. That's pretty good. I'm getting closer to that top 5%. If I'm going to get to that 1,000 downloads an episode, you're top 5%er if you can do that. So how do I get there? You just want to chase your own numbers. You don't worry about what other people are doing or what they tell you they're doing. They're probably stretching the truth a little bit anyway. Like
Definitely.
Libsyn and Buzzsprout tell you the numbers. They say this is what hit in our server log. So if somebody's like, "Oh yeah," if you meet 10 people tomorrow and they all tell you they're getting 20,000 downloads an episode, you're like, that's probably the probability of that is nearly impossible
Yeah.
since 95% of people don't even get 1,000. So, work on your show, your numbers. That's who you're competing against. Who you were a week ago and focus on that. And how do I move that needle just a little bit more?
For sure. Yeah, I like that, focusing on just what you can control, which is pretty much your craft, and not try to chase the money and stuff like that. That's what I do. Every 90 days, I look at my content and my analytics, and then figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then just go from there. Not really worried about you know trying to get a banger episode, because it's gonna happen. I'm gonna get one episode that goes viral, and it's gonna double my channel overnight. It'll happen just naturally by just getting better, and having notable guests come on, and just not worry about the money. So I like that you said focusing on your craft. That's really
Yeah,
that's
if you
really
do
great.
this for the wrong reasons, you will burn yourself out. It's a lot of work. People, you don't just turn on a microphone. There's the editing and the prep and the, learning about your guest, and then cleaning up all the ums and the uhs that you say at the beginning because you haven't learned how to speak on a microphone yet and take
Mhm.
out those little words.
Mhm.
So you want to just be a better you week after week after week.
Couldn't have said it any better. So, what kind of legacy do you want Poduty Live to leave in the podcasting space?
Man, I would love to see this pop up in DC and Baltimore and Cleveland and Cincinnati, and the middle podcasts, the ones who can't fill giant arenas, can start to do these little tours on the weekend. Come down to DC and do, 2 or 3 episodes in a night. Pop up to Cleveland the next day, and just keep networking and meeting and growing. And plugging into a system. Maybe there's not a Paduty in like Las Vegas, California area, but another little network of podcast theaters that you could fly out for a week and, do 10 shows, make some money and come back home and tour your local area. So
Mhm.
my goal, like the way comedy clubs have evolved over the year, maybe like comedians plug into the improv, right? And if you're an improv comic, you can play improvs all around the country. You start to do this. And if we get that for podcasting, how fun would it be to take your show on the road and, hit 3 or 4 cities in a weekend? It'd be a lot of it'd be a blast.
Oh, absolutely. A live tour. I just there's this podcaster from or she went to our university, my alma mater, and she has a podcast. She's been doing her show for 8 years, and she's toured and all that stuff. She actually told me that she went on like a girls trip with a bunch of her supporters and stuff like that. So that's
That's
really cool.
awesome.
Yeah. So look forward to doing that in the future. And all right, man, we're coming towards the end of the episode, but I just want to give you the final word. What do you want to leave the audience with?
Man, if you've ever considered live podcasting, even if you're not in the Pittsburgh area, you have some questions about what this is that I'm talking about, or if you're watching the video recording and you see the seats and the chairs behind me, and you're just curious in your town, maybe you're in Phoenix or California. I love talking about this. Don't think because I'm telling you about Pittsburgh and live podcasting that I don't want to help you become a live podcaster. I'd love it for you to, grow up in your area, blow up in your area, and then come out to Pittsburgh and do a show. So, reach me on the website, poduty.com, Poduty.com. You can email me right on there. There's forms you can fill out. They all go right to me. I answer all the emails and questions that we get. I even love talking about this. So if you have a podcast, I'll happily talk to you for another hour about, live podcasting and how to do your show live. So Poduty.com, best way to find me. That's it. That's all I want to tell you about.
For sure. My next question was going to be where should they find you at, but
Yeah.
you beat me to it already. So, all right, man. Well, thank you, Jeff, so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast having you. Greatly appreciate it. Beyond Ordinary Podcast. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Peace.